Get inspired. Transform your life. Welcome to Best Interest Radio.
All right, so we're here today with Mike Oz, who is actually currently producing our first single.
Hello, everyone.
So we're here today to talk a little bit about Mike's transformation, because it just through us coming to him to record, we ended up finding out that he went through a transformation himself, and so I thought I'd invite him on the podcast to hear his story and hear how he did it, and hopefully inspire somebody who's listening.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
So I guess I for the whole story to really make sense, we got to go to the beginning, and then I'll make a whole arc to the after transformation. So I'm from Toronto, and I've lived, a pretty happy life with parents. My parents ran a TV station, so I never went, missing anything when I grew up. And with that came also an ego type of lifestyle, DJing and making rock and roll music, and again, very ego driven and very selfish life, really. And with that, came a lot of alcohol and drugs and all that. But as much as I did, I experimented and enjoyed myself, and it was never, you could never really call it an addiction because it was never constant. It was always here and there, and sure, excessive, but I wasn't in full-fledged addiction of any kind. So,
Around like what age would you say that would
this
be?
would be definitely from like 16 to 30.
Okay, yeah.
An extended childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So then at about 30, I met this woman, and I was going to get married, and as we were engaged, I started finding out more about her, and that she was still on methadone and stuff like that, anyways, we were still drinking and still partying and all that, and so she probably shouldn't have been doing that. She got more depressed and whatever, and eventually she killed herself and threw herself off my balcony. While I was still home, and that put me into a tailspin and my first real crash, my first bottom. And but if you think that would make me stop drinking, that's no way. No, I went deeper because nobody had told me that alcohol was a depressant, right? So I had to learn that later in school, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
Sometimes you find out the hard way, right?
The hard way, absolutely, absolutely. So, so after that traumatic event, not soon after, my father died. So, that was for somebody who didn't have any way to to deal with these things except through alcohol and drugs. Right, that was definitely my darkest side of my time of my life, and. So skip to maybe 3-4 years of darkness, and I met my wife that I've just gotten married to here in Moncton some 4 months ago, and after being with her for 10 years, and she'll tell you the first 5 were definitely hell, right? I was still drinking and all that, and anyways, at this point, my musical career is... I've got a studio in Toronto, and I'm working a lot. But my personal musical journey that I had with my rock band was going to crap, and mostly because of my drinking. Which gives you an inability to be honest with people, and especially when you're hitting alcoholism stages, right? And you're not being honest with people, hiding your drinking. You're not having very good social relations. There's no way to definitely be the leader of a band, if that's what I wanted to call myself. So,
well, the way I describe addiction is like having somebody constantly nagging at you all the time, like whether it's a cigarette, I mean, the cigarette's kind of saying like, "Hey, come here, man, just smoke me, smoke me, smoke me," and it becomes annoying after a while. But then you almost become like a sort of slave to it, and
and that is exactly a good way to look at it, right? Because it's an attachment that then you are slave to. So it's a good way to separate, the person from the addiction, which is a very progressive modern way of looking at that. And so again, I only learned that through school many years later.
Did you even realize that you might have had an addiction at the time?
So I've been asked that a lot, and it's like from that age, maybe around 35, I started getting a good picture when, but anytime before that, all the way to when I started drinking at 15, if you had asked me, I would have said, I'm just having a good time, no. Yeah. And then of course denial would have been in there for sure, but also some naivety, right, about the whole thing, because frankly, I just called it partying.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people share that view as well. Like they just think it's partying and not really an actual problem. But it sounded like it was just distracting you from
having a life.
Yeah, from having anything flourish, right?
Yeah, because there was something missing, right? And alcohol seemed to, and the drug seemed to fill that missing puzzle piece inside of me. So anyways, so a lot of fighting, definitely. I'm not going to stick too long on the bad stuff, right? But but definitely, me and Jen did not have. We had some great days. We had a lot of dark days, and all the dark days were because of the drinking, right? So I'll jump to the transformation day. So finally, I think Jen had enough. Finally had enough of me drinking, and she came out and said she was going to leave, and that really, even though I was still drunk, I opened my eyes to that, and I kind of surrendered right there, and I said, "All right, find me the place, and I'll go detox." And so she found the place, and she knew what I needed. She knew it wasn't just a detox. She knew I needed minimum 45 days in, and no contact with anybody, from the outside. And
so just to ask you, did you try stopping at all before this happened?
26 times.
26 times.
On my own.
Okay.
From cold turkey to
going
to AA. It was by myself, pushed by others, all sorts of things.
Okay. When was the first time would you say you tried to stop, in your life, or what age roughly?
Like when I was saying to you, maybe around 35.
Around 35, and
then 35, and then it took me about 5 years.
5 years, and then after around 35 is when you made the transformation?
No, I made it at 40.
At 40, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
39. Yeah.
So around 35 is when you started. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. Where was I going with that?
Because no one really told me, right?
Yeah.
No one had actually come to me and said, "Hey, man, you need to stop," right?
Yeah.
No one's came and said that to me. People only had the balls later. I think the first person was my cousin, who had his own problems going on at that time, which I thought was hypocritical at first, and later I actually realized that. It takes a lot of guts when you're still in the mess and and you're already shaming yourself for that, to go out and still try and help somebody else. It may seem hypocritical, but hey, man, when you're trying to save somebody from the fire.
Yeah. Did you even notice did any profound situations happen that made you think, "Oh, I should probably stop doing this," or?
I could tell you I could tell you I've had angels come and whisper in my ear, if you stop, things will be fine. Okay. Yeah. To all sorts of small miraculous happenings. But I'm a counselor. I'm an addiction counselor now, and I can tell you that unless you are ready, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
There is no magical date. There is no magical number. There is no magical amount of days or amount of AA meetings, or everybody is different. Everybody has their own crucible, and everybody has to fall and hit their own rock bottom, which I pray for other people out there. It's not is not as hard as I've seen some people's fall.
Yeah, some people, or I shouldn't say some people, a lot of people kind of maybe not even consciously realize that we live by this limiting belief that we wait for like a certain scenario or a certain set of events to happen before we actually make a shift in our life, whether that's something as small as applying for a new job or going to rehab for an addiction. And we tend to like convince ourselves, just one more cookie, one more cigarette, one more beer.
Right.
I had a friend who struggled from a very severe alcohol addiction, and I didn't actually realize like how bad an alcoholic could be until I met her. Because I guess growing up, if you're not around that all the time, you don't truly know. You hear people like, oh yeah, they were an addict and they were addicted to alcohol and it was really bad, but you don't really know until you see them. She was sober for 2 years, and then she convinced herself that it was okay to drink again, and then she did, and like it was kind of like to the point where she was just like laying on the couch and literally would just binge drink for days and just become this in this state of complete despair of what you could call like nothingness. Like there's just like alcohol just totally took over her.
Oh yeah.
So, and it's just interesting because like then she kind of went like she'd go a couple months, she'd go to AA meetings, and then she like convinced herself to go back to that.
Yeah, that's the cycle.
And some people might like say, depending on their view system, they might say that the alcohol is actually the one kind of convincing her,
Yeah. So the alcohol on its own is just alcohol. Okay.
Yeah.
It's when you're in addiction, any type of addiction, it's because you're not happy with yourself for some reason. Something, a bad memory, a trauma, an unsatisfaction, shame, whatever it is that puzzle piece that's inside of you that you are unhappy with and you want to shut down and push down with the alcohol or with the drugs. That's when it's an addiction. It's also an addiction when there's negative consequences. Because I can smoke a joint and you know what? If I was really mad about something, I probably won't be so mad anymore. I mean, I can do that without a joint. But if I do that with a joint, I can promise you that I'm not going to go run somebody over with a car or get in a fight. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the negative consequences there with me and my smoking, well, I just don't see that addiction there because the negative consequences, I just don't see it there, right? But with alcohol, it was every day was a negative consequence, right? Every moment, it was always about to explode. I was about to explode, and everything was about to explode around me. Right? Projects were I would finish music projects barely, like they would still sound good, but you just weren't satisfied because you just barely made it at the last minute, right? That kind of feeling.
It takes you away from being present too, which can affect your progress on a lot of different things.
There's zero mindfulness, right?
Yeah.
Which is, being addicted is the opposite of being mindful. Mm-hmm. The diametric opposite, right? So anyways, what happened is I went to this rehab, and while I was there, a lot of the people that were there started coming to me as well as the counselors for their own, for their own problems. And my counselor came to me at the end of my 45 days and he said, Mike, you really have something there. You should go to school for this. And I'll be honest, something turned on in my head, and it was all part of the surrender, right? It was all part of really changing this transformation that came like a lightning bolt from above. And talked it over with my girlfriend at the time, which is my wife now, and Jen, and we said, so let's do this. It was actually coincidental that she had called me the same day and had been reading up about wanting to do the same thing, and this conversation was already kind of in the works when he brought it up. So, it was a sign. So we took and we moved away from Toronto where all my other drinking friends were. And as much as I would miss some of them, but I don't miss drinking with them as being the only scope of our meetings there, And so we moved away from Toronto, moved to where the where the college was, Fleming College in Peterborough. And that was already like moving away from a city full of all of that tension that's in a big city. I started realizing, going to school to be an addiction counselor, that one of the main things that I personally had was I had an anxiety disorder. And at the basis of my drinking, because when I started drinking at 15, I still remember the first drink. I left school. I left all my friends, and I went home, and I did what my mom did, which she would come home and drink this one big drink of whiskey, and I had it there on my own. And I remember the first day, the first taste, it was like this calm descended upon me, right? And as I'm sitting in class thinking about this, in addiction class, about mental health and anxiety and at what age the onset is, and that was me. And I realized, and I put a diagnosis on myself, which later a doctor actually gave me. So this low grade anxiety, generalized anxiety that I have, is a perfect reason for why I used, and many people use, drugs and alcohol as a substitute, as self-medication, right? We don't even know it, right? We are very good doctors on our own because we know ourselves, or many of us do anyways, or we can sense something that's wrong, right? Sorry. And so I realized that I had this anxiety, and that became transformative for me, because once you get the help to figure out what's wrong with you, your addiction starts getting real small. And instead of being this big monster upon you, right, because you're starting to take the reins on of who you are. And going to school really did this for me. But what really set it in stone is, after I graduated, I went back to the rehab where I saved myself, right? And they helped. And that was that I went back and I gave back.
Yep.
And that giving back, and they'll tell you in AA, which you can subscribe or not subscribe to, to get help from alcohol. It really is I've seen people do it either way, and I myself, when I do the 12 steps with people, I try to make it happen in 2 weeks, and
either way, it's good to have like a support system.
I'm just saying there's many different ways to get it out. But for me, getting to know what that problem was, and then being able to give back to people and teach it and tell people my own story, right? That was the most profound transformative effect, because it put the seal on it, right? You can learn things, but when you teach somebody something, or you repeat it out loud to somebody else, and you tell your story, you're really sedimenting that in your own neurons in your brain, right? And that's where, as an addiction counselor, I try and tell people, you have the power to change the neurological behavior in your brain. Yep. You alone can do this, right? With the right guidance, that you can change. It's possible. So forever.
Yeah, totally. I've done it myself. And
it's wonderful. And so that was my, the full circle that helped me get to where I am now. And I got to say, after 5 years of being sober now, my life has just been better year after year after year.
All right, that's awesome, man. So what I wanted to know was, what would you say the key things are that helped make that transformation? Like, what are the key tools that you use, and that really maybe are the principles that still stick with you to this day that helped you make that transformation?
So the first one, I think, in any transformative situation, kind of got to surrender your ego. That's what I had to do. Because it gets in the way. It's going to be feeding you all sorts of denial and, feeding you lies so that you don't change, because your ego doesn't want to change. It wants homeostasis. We get defensive real easy when people want us to change. We're not ready to change. So I guess the next thing would be, find the right moment for you to change. Are you ready to change? Think about it.
Yeah.
Because there's different, in school, I learned that there's different degrees of being even ready. You know what I'm saying? So when you think you're ready, you should probably take a pen and paper and write it down and start writing down the pros and cons of wanting to make that transformation. And you'll know right away if you're being honest with yourself, because you can't lie to yourself when you start writing it down on paper.
Exactly. And for me, one of the things I did was actually kind of a funny story. This is just a small example about an addiction. I was addicted to just nicotine. I guess I switched from smoking for years into to the vape. I also quit alcohol addiction too, but that's a different story. But the principle of this is really just kind of reframing what you were saying about, or reiterating what you were saying about just making that choice and the decision, like, are you ready? And it's really about just like jumping into that cold water and like taking the plunge, like kind of just not even really thinking about it and just doing it.
That's the best way. That's the best way.
So it's kind of funny. I was on the way to the beach one day with my friends, and I had already, like, I don't know, decided to make a bunch of different changes in my life. And I was telling my friend's girlfriend how I really felt like this nicotine vape was just like it's mentioned before, somebody nagging at you, and it was just really annoying. I was like, I don't want to stop this. Like, you have to constantly fill it up with vape juice, and it's gross. Like, those coils get stinky, and same with like cigarettes too. You're constantly buying a pack of cigarettes and dealing with the butts, and you smell like crap. And
I hated
all this stuff.
I hated it.
And all she said to me was like, well, why don't you just like stop like right now? And I was like, I don't know what it was in that moment, but I was like, you know what, you're right. So we get to the beach, and
wait. What was it? What was it in that moment? Can you go back? Was it her voice? Was it the just the honest to God way she asked you? Or?
It was just the honest to God way she said it, I guess. Maybe like the energy, emotions behind her voice, or she's like, why don't you just stop?
Let's
like,
put that in a bottle.
Yeah. She's like, so anyways, I went to the beach and I literally buried it in the sand, and I never vaped again. Like, I was just totally done with it.
Wait, so hold on a second. So what I'm hearing here is there was a ritual.
There was a ritual, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even witches, they bury their dolls in the sand and then bury them, and then that creates the ritual.
Yeah. You attach a meaning behind an experience, and it makes it easier to relate to it. It makes it more real of a thing, rather
than final, right? It's like you buried it like a person.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's the psychology behind that, like, really kind of like attributed to me actually quitting. But
you might have something here. This is a cool technique.
It is, yeah. And it's kind of different than there's a similar story too. When
this is a copyright best interest.
Yeah, copyright. Yeah. When I was like 100 pounds heavier, I remember one time walking in the staff room at work, and I'd gotten Papa John's, or maybe I was going to get Papa John's or something like that. It was just next door, and I freaking love Papa John's. I worked there for like 8 months, and I ate too much. I probably gained like 40 pounds or whatever. Like, that was years and years ago. Anyway, one of the things my coworker said to me, just like, she did not mean any harm when she said it, and just the way she said it, like the emotions and energy behind her voice, she was like, why are you gonna eat like pizza? Like, that's bad for you. Like, why would you do that? Like, and why are you gonna choose to eat unhealthy? Or whatever she said, and I just kind of thought about it. And, some people might be offended. They're like, who is she not to tell me to eat pizza?
Is this the same girl?
No, this is a different girl. Maybe they're cousins or something, but no, I'm just kidding. But no, like, it just, some people might get offended, be like, oh, who is she to tell me to not eat pizza? But I was like, you know what? I shouldn't eat pizza. And so I didn't. And of course, still, years later, I kept eating pizza. But that day I didn't anyway. Yeah. But, that moment stuck with me. And I actually did probably make some a little bit better decisions because of it. But I think sometimes
So what do you think was your psychological coping mechanism that was going on for eating more than you should? Do you think that you were coping with something?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Like, I mean, why do we eat? It's a pleasurable experience. stimulates every sense in our body. Like,
yeah, I meant more like a coping mechanism. Like a lot of people eat because they're depressed.
Yeah.
And they think that eating is going to help with that. And the initial sugar rush usually does something.
The dopamine.
Yeah, it fools you into thinking that you're making yourself happy, but it's a short burst, and then there's depression that follows.
Exactly.
Right. So again, that's how we try to fool ourselves with these addictions and denial.
Mm-hmm. Whether they're big or small addictions.
Oh yeah, people think that gambling. Some people don't even think that's an addiction.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge addiction. It's one of the biggest killers.
I think, long story short, addiction is really just kind of losing control of things in your life.
Okay, yeah, I can. Yes, absolutely. Losing the control,
allowing other things to control you.
Yes, yes.
Because you can be addicted to people.
Although in my advanced recovery, I can tell you that the best part about recovery is that you can learn what total acceptance is, and to know that you don't control everything, and you don't need to control anything.
Yes, exactly.
And then because most of the problem that people have is they think they need to control everything, and that makes them freak out when they can't, and they don't lead a happy life because of that. Whereas one of my greatest fonts of happiness comes from the fact that I don't feel I need to control anything anymore. I used to have to control everything. That was one of my problems with my alcoholism, is I needed to, and it was part of my anxiety, I needed to control everybody. And guess what? You can't control anybody.
No.
What you think in your head is going to happen when you wake up in the morning, and this person's going to do this, and this person's going to do that, that's all hogwash. That's never going to happen, right? It's this illusion that we create in our minds of how we want things, these expectations, right? I teach people to lower their expectations, right? And it sounds bad at first, but in reality, take life as a big surprise. Stop putting all these expectations on other people and what they're going to have to do and when they're going to arrive and what they're going to do for you, what they're not going to do, and all these things. I just don't need to control anything anymore. And so whatever happens is like, oh, okay, they didn't show up for that set. Okay, well, what are you going to do? There's, I can't control that. And so once that happened, I think personally that's why I haven't had any desire to drink again, is because I quelled that inner fire that I had to control things. That's my paradigm. Everybody has their own.
I think it goes both ways, honestly. I think everything has a sort of double-edged sword to it. For me, quitting my addiction, I think I do relate to what you were saying there about giving up control, and kind of like, the Serenity Prayer, where it's like, give me the strength to control the things I can and to kind of accept things I can't.
That's right. Yeah.
For me, I guess I kind of realized my own power of my mind and my own potential, and like took back control. That alcohol and the nicotine and the food and all that stuff was no longer nagging at me and being like, Jordan, come eat me, come smoke me, come drink me. I was like, screw you, like I don't need you.
Totally. You took your power back, bro.
Exactly. And take your power back, and then also kind of just not too much of it back, because you don't want to be obsessed with your power.
Well, that's back to the ego, right? Yeah. If you tend to lead in, because, and again, just to throw this in there, people who are in recovery, I hear people use that word badly. I find recovery to be like a rebirth. Yeah, and you look like you feel like it also, like it's a rebirth for you, right?
Oh, totally.
And it's like a new life, right? And that's what, the recovery has sometimes too much stigma and bad connotations attached to it. But I like to think of it as a rebirth, like a phoenix,
One of the things I wanted to talk about was maybe times before where you thought about quitting or tried to quit, or even when you went through like the main transformation where you actually went to rehab and stuff. Was there a part of you that maybe felt, either consciously or subconsciously, that you might let go of, you were kind of afraid to let go of some like people in your life, like you might lose that social interaction with friends that you might have had at that time, like
huge,
because when you quit drinking or anything, you have to like let go of the people who did that.
Sure.
And it's like kind of that fear of missing out.
Oh yeah. One of my first ones. In fact, I'll tell you the tail end of it first is when I was already sober 2 years, and I hadn't seen this group of friends who I'd made a lot of music with and partied my 8 years straight with. Anyways, I invited them to my house in Peterborough, which by now was a dry house. You can't drink there and you can't bring any booze there. And so they came over, and the first thing that I thought I was going to miss out on was the laughter. I hadn't pictured in my mind how we used to laugh so much and have such a great time. And I was like, I hope we don't miss, it's not going to be there because the booze isn't there, right? And let me tell you, we laughed and had, I think, a better time. More laughter, and I remembered it all, and there was no bickering at the end, and it was it all was not the way I had programmed it in my mind initially, right? Because we do that to ourselves. We think in our mind a certain way, and then in reality, it doesn't turn out to be that way, right?
Exactly. There's our own view on reality, and there's the objective reality.
Our ego, again, will tell us these lies. Our brain, our mind is not always our best friend.
That's true. It's kind of funny. I remember when I went through my transformation, I quit drinking and stuff. And I mean, I don't know, you call myself like a functional alcoholic or something. I'd have 6 beer 2-3 times a week. And, that adds up.
Sure. You're never out of the fog that way.
But I did and then when I was like, I'm going out drinking, it would be like, a quarter or two, and I would, embarrassing stuff would happen, all that jazz.
Of course.
But it was kind of funny. I was a totally different person. You can ask anybody in my life. I totally flipped 180 degrees. But one funny aspect was my drummer actually said this to me. Steve, he's actually a comedian too. But and you've met him too. His personality is kind of like, he's got like a dry humor, and he was just so serious when he said this. But he's like, man, I can't believe how much you've changed. I really almost didn't even like you before. He's like, but I like you now.
When you guys were here recording, actually, your bassist said the same thing. He said, which I thought at first, because I don't know you, I thought, geez, that's kind of odd to kind of like call him out like that. I mean, even in a good way, but that's kind of personal shit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so after you guys left, I thought back to myself, I thought, that must have been some big transformation he had for him to mention it like that.
No, it was, yeah. Yeah, it was really, it was pretty funny.
Good on you, brother.
It's, but I mean, I like to say that really wasn't me. That was just my choices.
That's how it feels to me. I think back 5 years, I can't recognize that person.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. I mean, you can watch a video of me performing in I think it was 2017, right before I decided to make that switch. Okay. And I'm 285 pounds, I'm all swelled up. I had laryngitis at the time, and I look at myself and literally I was watching that with my drummer actually one day, and we were kind of laughing our asses off. We're this does not you died, that's not you anymore. And I was yeah, I guess the parts that I need to let go of died, and then kind of you elaborate on the good parts of yourself.
That's why I like the analogy of the phoenix, right? It's the phoenix that is reborn from its ashes.
Yeah, it's a
fire. Yeah,
it's very true. Even though, it's a commonly used term.
Yeah,
some people call it cliche, but it's true.
Go through the fire, man, because it's not easy.
Yeah.
I guess the one thing we didn't mention in this whole thing is, guess what? It's not easy.
Yeah.
Because you make it sound easy. I don't know if I made it sound easy. This isn't certainly one of I give AA talks that are really brutal, because you kind of want to you want to kind of impress them, about how bad shit was, and then how to help them change, right? But I definitely left out a lot of the greasy stuff. So
yeah, I think people can kind of piece it together.
It is hard. It is hard. It's not easy. It's not going to be easy. But the reward of transforming yourself, whatever it is, whatever you're setting your goal for, get ready.
I actually kind of saw it as I'm working hard either way. We're all working hard no matter what we're doing. So and by that I mean we're either going to be working hard, fighting disease and fighting all these problems, or we can work hard to better ourselves. And so it comes down to a choice. And when you work hard, when you realize that you're working hard either way, and then you work hard towards things that are going to better yourself, then that's when it becomes easy. So it's like a paradoxical. You work hard, but then things get easier.
It's like when you love the work you do. Is it really work?
Yeah, exactly. I always say, if you love what you do, you'll never have to work a day in your life. And I consider myself privileged, blessed, grateful for, having a career as a massage therapist. I love what I do, and I help people, and not everybody has that. So
I'm just missing the schooling, right? But my wife will tell you. If only I could make that a job too. But no, man, congrats on all your changes.
Yeah, you too, man. Like it's a rocky road, but you're here now, and I think we can agree that part of, and you probably teach this too, like when you want to sustain change or create change, you need to have a greater purpose or meaning than you have now. And for you, it sounds like it was helping other people that helped you sustain it.
Yeah, which made me see. You keep winding it down to the smallest denominator. So what was that? What did that do for me? It made me happy, right? And that's what I try to. The part that I do teach to people, because I only want to teach them stuff that they can take with themselves and make them independent. Because that should be the counselor's highest hope, is not to keep giving lessons. It's to send the person off with the right illumination so that they figure it out on their own. Because that's the only way that anybody will ever change, is when you figure it out on your own and the light turns on, and that's when it happens. That's when it sticks.
Yeah. So for somebody who might be listening right now, they could perhaps be struggling with an addiction. So what would you say, what should they do? What would be your advice? Like, who should they reach out to, and where should they go?
Well, if
maybe they might be afraid to go somewhere first.
Yeah. So from the simplest thing to what I mentioned before, literally write down on a piece of paper the pros and cons of quitting.
Yeah.
That's the first thing, because to know where you stand on how ready you are, how many things you're going to have to give up, and how many things you're going to gain. And one of the reasons that we have people do these is because. Sometimes it's what takes you right over the edge and pushes you right to the detox, because you're like, oh my God, I thought there was all these things stopping me, but there's actually all these positive things that are awaiting me.
Yeah.
Let's go. Yeah. Right. So that's the first step that I try to tell people, because, you also want to approach this thing with like a no harm attitude, right? With harm reduction. So this one here has pretty much no harm to it. And then the next thing I would say is go seek medical help. But again, then everyone's going to come and tell me all the detoxes are full, all the beds are full. And this is true. Right? So then the next thing would be reach out to somebody who knows more, reach out to somebody like me. There's a lot of people online. There's a lot of people on Facebook. Find somebody that's got some reputable studying behind them. And,
there's tons of different.
I'll be honest, you don't need those 3 letters behind your name to help somebody. Personally, I find somebody that's already helped themselves. And I'm not dissing somebody who goes to school for addiction counseling and hasn't had an addiction, but I've spoken to too many addicts, and the only reason my biggest way in with them was the fact that I'd been addicted to all these things.
Exactly, yeah.
They trusted me inherently, right? And I didn't need to spend 2-3 weeks for them to open up like a clam. Because they knew that I went through the fire and I just came out, all the more reason, they trusted me, and they were able to open themselves up and figure out what their missing piece was, which ultimately is happiness, right? I try to explain this to people. Find your happiness. Put a big list on your fridge of the list of things that make you happy, and give yourself options.
And if anybody's listening to this right now, you could, well, obviously you're listening to it right now. I hope you're listening if this is on. But no, I was going to say, I have an article called "What Does It Take to Be Happy?" So you can find that on my website. I'm sure that'll be up by the time I release this episode.
I want to read it right away.
Yeah, and it talks about all the different things need to be happy, and it's a sense of belonging and a sense of community and like having a support system and basically all the stuff that you would learn in any sort of psychotherapy, whether it's addiction counseling or anything else like that.
That's fantastic.
It's just honestly just simple life advice, but yeah, that's great. So do you offer any counseling services at this moment?
So in this moment, because I only have my home and my recording studios in the home. Right. So already I've got that going here. So not presently. In fact, since I moved here to Moncton, it's been kind of interesting. I asked the universe, I said, when I'm here, if you want me to do just music, or that's great. If it's going to be helping people, let's do that. It's sort of whatever came my way. And what came my way was interesting because I have had 3 students that have quite some mental health. And if I hadn't had this training, I would not have been able to help them. And some of them had really intense ADHD. And if I didn't know what that meant, I wouldn't have been able to help them focus and the right way and use their own, techniques with them to learn, and the same thing with a lot of my artists have one or listen, I don't know anybody who can say that in arm's length either they or somebody else close to them doesn't have a mental health situation going on of any sorts, right? So we're all touched by it, and so in the music business and the music, I guess we're very sensitive people, and I've found that a lot of the people, a lot of the artists that I've interacted with have had either addiction or mental health problems, which is one and the same. And I guess if you have an addiction, and it's been a blessing because I've been able to do my job and then some, on one side and as another. Sure, I'd actually like to facilitate some groups soon enough, but I've had some offers from the Canadian Mental Health Association, but that's coming up in August.
Oh, that's great.
We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when you learn this stuff and learn how to get out of the well, and you can help other people do the same just through your own everyday social interactions, you can end up helping people just by sharing your story.
100%, and it feels great, and just to look upon somebody's eyes who's being touched by your message, and
one thing I would like to add is an interesting view is as a massage therapist, you come to learn that people hold emotions and trauma in their body. Mm-hmm. And so that stress in your shoulders is literally stress in your shoulders, is not just from sitting at a desk all day. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because there's lots of instances where a patient might come in and you massage them, work on them lots and lots of times, and their shoulders are kind of always the same. They might experience a little bit of results after the treatment, but they come back the same as it was. And then there's instances where that same patient comes back one day and all of a sudden speaks what is going on within them and talks to somebody. And literally, maybe that therapist doesn't even help them or give advice. They're just there to listen. Yeah. Because we can't technically give advice as massage therapists, but a lot of us just listen.
Sure.
And that might be all somebody needs to at least spark some sort of change within them. And so it actually shows, after they do that, all of a sudden they have their shoulders pain or tension gets a little bit better.
Sure.
Way better than it was before.
They're releasing.
Exactly, yeah. So and the reason why I'm saying this is because if there's somebody listening right now, or just go talk to somebody, and you don't even need to expect them to do anything. Just it's good to have somebody there to listen. There's lots of people willing too.
Oh yeah. When I had this, when this woman killed herself and off my balcony, I went to, my mom sent me to a psychiatrist, which I had never been to one, and I didn't know what to do, and when I went there, I basically just talked for 2 hours straight, not letting her interrupt me. And I just unloaded everything. Then I walked out. I never went back because I personally didn't feel like I needed to, because it's like I unloaded everything that I had. I had somebody who finally listened, who in my mind was an expert that, would have told me if something was absolutely horrible what I was saying, or if I needed help. And then so I totally agree with what you're saying. talking with, and that's the biggest thing, right? That people have the biggest obstacle is to just get over that first hump and go see somebody that's supportive.
It's like almost like emotional constipation. You got to let it out.
Absolutely.
So before we wrap it up here, one thing I wanted to ask you is like this may or may not be related to addictions or anything, but what inspires you throughout your life every day? Like, what comes to mind?
Inspiring to change now is, inspiring to change myself and to keep going, to know, and to inspire to change others. Through music and through community networks that I've been making, and that's when I get up in the morning, that's what I like. That's what I use mostly Facebook for. Apart from work and stuff like that, or curiosities, but it's to build connections and networks with people who you never know who you're going to be able to help, right? We all have special abilities, things that we're effective at, and I'm just always trying to be of service is something that was the biggest transformation as far as character. If you look at me 20 years ago and me today, like before I was self-serving, and now I'm open to serving others, right? And staying open and staying willfully open so you can, the universe can access you to help this person out or help that person out. That's a great gift. Before I used to give this analogy, I'd drive on the highway and I'd just be going somewhere. Now I drive on the highway, and if there's somebody that's pulled over with their car, you're going to pull over and check and see if they're okay, because that's the person I'm aware of now. I'm aware of things now.
That's a good analogy.
I'm mindful now. And so when you're mindful, the universe can access you to help others, to create that network and give you, open that energy for you to go help somebody else that's in need, that needs you, right? If you're not aware, you're just going to walk right by that situation.
Exactly. That's right. I love that analogy. So, and I guess also to wrap this up, if anybody wants to record music, where do they find you?
Okay. You can find me at StudioZproductions11.com, and that's the new studio website. We're here in Moncton, and otherwise you can find me as Mike Oz in Moncton on Facebook.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mike's by the time this is aired, our single "Planting Seeds" from my band Short for Arthur will be out, and
check that
doing
out.
a really good job.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
I love these guys.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. So, anyways, thanks for coming on, Mike.
Hey man, thanks for having me. This has been a blast.
Yeah, it'd be great. Maybe next time we can talk about just pure music or something.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
All right, have a great one.
You too.